Susan, do you want to say something introductory about your frameworks? And then we can jump into intuitive network context from there. Oh, except perhaps with your microphone on.
Ah,
There we go.
I went from being live to alive. um, let's see. Well, I'm Susan Hasty, and I am a positive deviant. um, and how I came to this framework. Actually, I'm also, I guess you could say, a recovering um, capitalist. And after spending about 35 years in the business world, loved business and and really in trying to help clients um, after after um, being in the source of their pain and anguish running companies. um, I, I delved into an area I thought was going to be somewhat simple, which is how to help people differentiate, discern between strategy and structure. It turns out that structure is a really, really complicated topic. And it took me all the way to the height of philosophy, etc. And so what fell out of it after working with and learning from and dealing with so many brilliant people across the world, um, I've been able to kind of drill it down into a framework that is more embodied, that anyone with a little effort and with a sense of curiosity mixed with courage, that they can sit with uncertainty um, and complexity, can absorb it and apply it to their lives. I'm a very practical person. And so that's what I'm going to present today is kind of the essence of the framework. It looks simple on the surface, but becomes increasingly rich and vibrant and living when you start actually engaging with it, because it's taking us kind of out of the very frustrating, very viciously cycling narratives that I think we're stuck in. And so it does demand that it asks us, it invites us to explore not only how we're living life, but how life is living through us. Yeah, 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 good.
So I have had something like 2.5 conversations with Susan. We talked pretty extensively last Thursday in the Purple Squirrel Cafe, and then I joined one of Ryan's common good activation conversations, which was recently, but my sense of time is a little bit horked, but it was in the last few days, possibly, I think. And yesterday, was it yesterday? It might have been yesterday. No, it was yesterday. And then Susan and I have talked, shared intermittently between those sessions. And one of the things that that has come up a number of times is that in describing her frameworks, Susan happens to be describing quite a large number of elements and aspects that in building the intuitive network architecture, I and our colleagues have found to be crucial to meeting challenges that many or most other people think cannot be met. We are in the business of addressing the greatest challenges at intersections that most others, including most professionals, find they feel they have to distance themselves from. They don't feel equipped. It wasn't part of their training. They never knew anybody to address those kinds of challenges before. So intuitive network architecture has been developed to solve impossible problems, which is what we've been doing for the past decade. And I really notice when someone comes into conversation with us and is describing principles that are at least somewhat in alignment with what we've had to build, because it's fairly rare to be in conversation with someone who seems to understand more of those principles. And so I get very interested immediately. And of course, Susan's work is new to me. This is early days, so I don't know exactly what we're going to find. We're going to notice some interesting distinctions, I'm sure. But what kept coming up in our conversations was I'm working at intersections where what we're having to do and how we're having to do it is quite unique, and it requires the explaining of a lot more context than people expect. And I didn't want to take over any of those conversations, so we thought we'd dedicate this one. Also, having Tony here is really important, because part of how all of this, there's this interesting collection of conversations that's come together. Ryan, you bringing in the way that you hold structure for dialogue, for connectivity, for relationship building. And Tony has been having these wonderful conversations with us about time banking for the past some weeks. And with Susan bringing in her frameworks now recently, me just getting introduced to those, there's something happening in dialogue between the four of us that is really important to the intuitive network. And it is definitely my job to attempt to convey more of what that is. And so it's best for us to broadcast it so that more people can tune in and we can all learn together. That's whatever works for you. You have the most production, Foo. I really appreciate uh, you helping run the functions of all of this. So one of the things I think would be really helpful for me to bring in, I keep coming on point after point after point when Susan is talking about her frameworks, I keep going, oh, I should point that out. Oh, I should point that out. Oh, I should, and I'll just say a few things. First of all, in the intuitive network, because we are choosing for communities to be most whole, we don't want to be losing people invisibly. We don't want there to be predatory influences coming in and taking people out from under our noses. We don't want people to be exploited in the bad way of exploiting right under our noses. We want to know our community members, and if people are in hardship, if people are experiencing injury, if people are experiencing invisibility, if they're experiencing violence, that doesn't make them not a part of our community body. They're a really important part of our community body. And in order to come together to meet those challenges, instead of saying, oh, well, those people have those challenges, there's nothing we can do, we'll be over here. Many people don't know what to do except survive where they're at. But we've developed a number of different approaches for meeting these challenges together and choosing to say, this is a life and death situation. This is a really challenging thing. This is maybe really scary. And when we come together and we practice together in certain ways and we believe in ourselves and one another, we have a tremendous amount of power that can get us through the scariest of challenges. And a lot of what we have had to focus on in order for that to have any chance of working at all is what is the inherent life force energy that is in each of us? How does that energy behave? What is the nature of that energy? I have studied a lot of different sorts of subjects. So, like permaculture, druidry, nature science, like a lot of different, like, let's really pay attention to the natural world and let's really learn from her. And let's really, like, we are part of the body of the planet. We are part of the body of the cosmos. What do we know in our bodies? What is the most natural epistemic basis for, well, how do we rise to an impossible challenge? Nobody ever taught us how to do this. In fact, most people have told us, you can never meet that challenge. You won't survive. You can't do it. It's not even possible. And that's been piled on so many of us, so that if we are going to find a solution, it's going to have to be emergent as part of the life force energy that is part of all of us. And Susan, when you're describing your frameworks, you are centering that massively, and you're describing a lot of and I want to let you go more into this, but there are a lot of architectural principles that you're describing that we have found our community members do not survive without recognition of those elements. And I have intensive personal experience of that. So I'll pause there. And there's so much more for me to say, but I wanted to say that first.
Very, very powerful. And thank you for bringing life energy into the space, because that is very much about how we make that space between us safe. When you so we look at, I will say, everybody's this is about music. This is about art, and I would have never claimed to be either one of those. I mean, but it turns out that our life force, which in many ways, in retrospect, is paradoxically enhanced by the brokenness by the fact that we are the illusion that we're supposed to be perfect and we're supposed to live up to these ideals, and we're constantly letting ourselves down, and we're letting each other's down, and it's almost like, well, maybe what we're going through is and I talk about the global crisis. But maybe that's the impetus that we need to create the metamorphosis. That our brokenness actually is what will end up being our strength. So that is very much kind of the impetus that I had, was to one, share what I've learned, but what I've learned came out of a lot of pain and suffering. And when I think about the art in the world, the music in the world, and what is being said, and what is being broadcast, not just through what we consider media, but what is being broadcast at the level of resonance, of coherence, that there is a living life force in information itself. That if we begin, what I went down into was in trying to understand, comparing what is the ideology of business. I'll just say that outright, because it very much is an ideology, versus an ontology, and we won't go there today. It'd be worth having a session just on that, because how we rise up and grab hold of concepts and abstractions, and how information travels through our language, but in addition, how it couples and coalesces and invites us in, and how our perception is actually very intuitive. And yet we when we understand the richness of it, we can rise above the black and white world that ideologies demand of people. And in fact, I was thinking about, you hear so much talk about the good and the bad. I mean, in other words, we're demonizing or idolizing. And I was going to throw it back to Ryan and say, Ryan, would you have even been interested in music if all you could play was two notes? If there were only two notes in the world? Boom, 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 boom. Yet you yourself said you only play three strings, so you can mix and match all those different sounds into melodies. And Megan Elizabeth, you're an artist, you're a painter. I mean, it's like there's 5 basic colors, right? Yet you can mix and match and turn things into beautiful art, with those basic elements, just with those basic elements. And so how do we tease out and actually reveal where is the flow? We talk a lot about flow, psychological flow, but there's more flowing here, I think, in the world than we're even beginning to touch. There's so much power that we as collectives have that has yet to evolve, is starting to awaken, is starting to bloom. And that's where I came up with, in fact, it was, I've got a piece of art hanging on the wall. It says bloom. And I was like, what do I call this? Right. And it was like, active bloomology. Just because, quite frankly, there is no, I'm going to pull back in ontology, which is how we know things, how we categorize things. Okay. And there really is not a living ontology. So even at the highest level of, of philosophy, they're just starting to crack open the possibilities. And so hopefully what, my aspiration is that people will be able to use what I'm about to show you to open up and hold space for new possibilities that exist between them, because what our historical education system, academic systems, all of these systems have basically atomized us into identities, into objects, if you will, that that it's no wonder there's so many people who feel like they're imposters, because there is no reality in a world that's flat. There is only you're a subject that I can manipulate, or or an object that that holds no value, because we're certainly getting that from a lot of messages in the media, etc. So I'm going to jump in and bear in mind that this is about relational flow, what is living in the living flow of life, is contrasted to the very static view that historically we've been putting a lot of attention on. We put a lot of attention on various objects that have closed boundaries, that when you talk about systems, people automatically start looking at something like it's a flat object that doesn't move. So what this begs of you is to think on a different frame of, what is flowing between us? Okay. I'm going to try to.
If I can jump in before you continue, I just want to highlight that one of the things that I have found very important about what you've described today and in previous sessions, something that's very important in the intuitive network specifically, is that there need to be language bridges for people to be able to increasingly recognize that opportunity for living relationship.
Yeah.
It's something that we've talked about in terms of time banking too, where it's like, well, how do we show, when people are in all these separate circumstances, how do we show the relationships between people, the meaningful exchanges between people? And time banking has come up again and again, and our conversations with Tony have begun to highlight that in some really wonderful ways. And Susan, when you're describing your frameworks, you're languaging the vitalness and the vitality of these relational energy flows in a way that we think can only be recognized in spaces that have not been able to recognize them, if there's a language that bridges that to create a structure so they can recognize the structure, and then they can tune into the spaces in the structure and start to recognize more of this. Because people are really, a lot of people are in spaces and contexts where the life energy has been sapped out.
Yes.
People's lives, people's work, people's environments, people's like relationships have a brittleness or a hollowness to them, and people are like, I don't know what the problem is. Like, I have everything I could possibly want. Why do I feel so terrible? Why are things not working? And what I find really valuable about the way you've described your structures so far is I see you directing to those life energies with the structures, because other structures are erasing the life energies. And that's
great
a
point.
major a major premise on which I have built intuitive network architecture, because we had to have some kind of structure that would point to the missing life energy and help us build and grow that
Yes.
life energy. And that's one of the things that I've been seeing in your frameworks as you've been describing them.
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out, because languaging is so important. It can when we think about, when we're, especially in terms of understanding that, as I got into the perception action, the ecological world, the research being done in more of the natural sciences and biology, and Michael Levin's work, Carl Friston's work in active inference. What becomes evident is that we assume we are communicating through language.
That sounds like a conversation that I might start on a very frequent basis. I'm interested in hearing you continue that conversation.
Well, it turns out that our sensory perception, and when you learn about the inactive world, the 4E cognition, the work that is being done about collective consciousness, etc., and understanding that we don't have a language yet for that is what I'm going to call domain general. Okay. And what I mean by that is that the way education has followed history, okay, and become specialized in and of itself. Niche construction, the way nature works, is that it constructs a language, a shared language that is specific to a particular domain. Now, I think what I'm perceiving in the world that I haven't heard a lot of talk about it. I think if I say it, people go, "Oh yeah, oh yeah," because in niche construction, as in if you look at groups of wolves, for example, okay, they design their space to protect themselves, and it's so different from humans. We move into spaces and we start protecting the resources that are in them, and humans have a unique capability of doing that with language. And so we create jargon that does help message passing between specializations, but it also acts as a moat to keep out people, to keep out the competition.
For instance, or to keep out predators.
Well, no, actually, so, I like to kind of look at it from the perspective of that the structure. This is not to say that I am giving any sympathy whatsoever. Let me preface this with, I'm not giving any sympathy to psychopaths or predators. A lot of what spurred this on was that I really detest bullies. And so, but I will say that I've become more compassionate. We were talking a little bit about this yesterday, in understanding how actually the structure itself is driving predatory behavior. It's almost like it's in our society today, it's almost a coping strategy if you and start really pulling back the onion on how language manipulates. And I say that in an academic way in terms of how we use language to manipulate our environment, how we use language to influence others, to motivate others. And so to your point, if you because our education system also, I think it was the pedagogy of the oppressed. If Vieiro, said that our education system was like a banking system, he used more beautiful language around it. But in other words, the education system is the model that we're going to just deposit information in people's heads, right? In other words, you're just a vat you're just a brain in a vat. And really, it's only been in the last, quite frankly, I mean, it's been research has been said for beginning in the last 40 years, but now in the last 5 years, it's actually evidence-based that that we actually our intelligence extends beyond what is just inside of us. Still debated, and there's a lot of people that don't really want that to get out, because as long as we're atomized, as long as we feel like we're alone, that gives power.
I think that it's an especially important point, because in building the intuitive network, in order to embrace and connect our community members who are most severely affected, who are most invisible, who are most injured, who are most unable to communicate unless people are there helping repair neurology, help bodies to recover. When we don't prioritize awareness of how we are all inherently interconnected, it becomes impossible for many of those people to survive. And I would not be sitting here with you if not for the power of the collective.
Yeah.
I don't know best way to say it in any particular instance. The collective conscientiousness is kind of what
I love
say.
that collective ingenuity.
That one of the reasons that our disability recovery aid infrastructure is based on Telegram, and the way that we've had to build it is so that we could share hearts and brains with one another. So that if there is a group of people who is all kind of thinking about the same situation and going, I don't know what to do. I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough, I can't send this, or I can't do this.
Yeah.
But my heart is here, and my mind is here, and I'm embodied, I might be separate from these other people, but I'm here and I care about this, and I'm gonna bring my attuned presence to it. And what we find is that 2 or 3 or 4 people doing that together can radically increase the neurological function of any individual in that situation who otherwise could not function. And these are situations where people do not have safe food. They cannot get away from violent perpetrators. They don't have safe water. They can't leave their location. They're not mobile. Very, very extreme physical circumstances that people are in. And what they most need first is brain function. And even if we can increase brain function just a little bit, they might see solutions that nobody else could take advantage of. And so if it weren't for the power of that collective interconnectivity, I and a lot of my colleagues would never have survived. Because our individual bodies did not or do not have enough of what is needed for the survival of the body. And so I just wanted to take a moment to illustrate that.
Yes. Well, and what I've learned, I also have done quite a bit of work around intergenerational collective trauma, and how um, the toxic parts of society, and yeah, the I'll use a word from Michael Levin. He talks about the anagrams, the history, the artifacts that that are actually in our intergenerational psychic memory. Okay, continue perpetuating violence, and it does it through our nervous systems, and how and this actually, the framework is to point out that we all are perceiving different opportunities in the world. And so, for somebody to get on a stage and say, I've been great, I did this, and you can do it too, it's completely unrealistic, because I can't perceive the affordances, the opportunities in the world that other people can. We all, and quite frankly, the beautiful side of that is that is actually where our diversity lives, is that when we can come together and begin to couple what we're seeing in the world. When I say see now, I'm talking beyond the physical. I'm talking about seeing opportunities that for healing, for coming together, and coupling our capabilities together so that we actually create more value. And so part of what is going on, because of our ideological economic system, it's not an it because the economics reduces everything down to a transaction, reduces everything down to it has to carry some preordained amount, that one, people think that money is value. Money is not in value. It is a carrier of a statement of worth, but it has no value in of itself. I mean, wait until the market crashes and we'll see that real clear. But so the first part that I'll just share with you before I get into there's really only two elements of this. But the first one that showed up, and again, there's just so many people that, that I should be citing, like we could spend the rest of the time with me just going over everybody that contributed to this. But what I saw in how we think about value flow, was that in our vernacular, in our narrative, everything gets reduced down to what I'm going to call expendable value. Expendable value is substance. It's what we do need to eat, but it's a value that we can only consume. Once we consume it, it's gone. Okay. Now, going back to the object subject part, is when we as human beings are seen as disposable, which we very much are in the economic theory. We are disposable. We are objects, so we can it be stolen. I mean, that doesn't speak volumes, that we are some object that can be displaced or stolen with no conscious effort. You can see how that mentality reduces and flattens reality for everybody, right? And so what I discovered, though, is that our brains, we're constantly wanting to associate one thing to another. And you look at statistics, you look at most math, there's always a basis, a weighting. Okay, I'm going to weight this as more valuable than that. What I'm going to share with you now is I found it to be profound, because if it just doesn't exist, if a form of value is just omitted, overwritten, then my brain can't find it in the space and time. I can't find it, so I can't identify it. It's like, think about going into I meet somebody on Match or whatever, and I'm going to meet them at a restaurant. I don't know what they look like. Okay, so I go into the restaurant and I'm looking around. I can't find them. I can't identify them. Okay, then I can't. My perception is having a hard time of even distinguishing what is a threat, and what is a risk, and what is uncertainty, and what is the reward. That's how our brains work. I mean, we're always searching for rewards. We're always searching for resources, and yet if it's just not there, then I'm just discombobulated.
This is
That's the problem. So
Yeah.
what I've done is I've said, oh, okay. Again, yeah, this language it's not my own. I bring it in from recommendations. So if you look at so what is expendable now, so this becomes a topology, not a typology, but a topology, a geometric topology. And I'm leading into what I'm going to show you, which is the main part of this in terms of the configurals, but this is worth just kind of adding on, and if we riff on this alone. But if we look at how we create value together, okay, then we can look at what is extensible. What if we extend to each other? What do we extend to each other is an extensible form of value flow. So let's kind of, let's take the value that we deposited in the bank, and it becomes capital. Okay, that's not flowing. If it's not flowing, it's not alive. So we're talking about the life forces, right? So extensible value, and this actually speaks to what Tony said, because this is about reach. How do I reach out, right? Now, let's add a third value flow, and that would be expandable value. How do we come together and couple your reach with my reach, and we're not just expanding our reach, we're expanding our range, the range of possibilities, the range of opportunities to come together, whether it be through, which is how I'm really seeing time banking, is you're extending the reach of being able to help each other, work with each other, grow together. And then you're expanding the range of opportunities. Now, so each one actually builds on the others. It's you have to have the expendable, okay, because we do need to eat. But how do we gain or reclaim our sovereignty? Is we build our capacity to collectively work together, so that we lift everybody up, and now we can actually exponentially create changes that do more than just protect other people. We're nurturing them. We're actually developing them. We're helping each other develop each other. And so it's very much about language. And so affordances are opportunities for action that our perceptual fields are attuned to. But this is not something that that can be deposited into us. It is not a a cognitive issue in the sense of I can educate you, I can empower you. That's almost hubris in and of itself. I can create conditions where you can increase your reach and range to be able to see more opportunities. The languaging actually comes into effect when now you can articulate what you need, what you want, who you are. Because, yeah, we need to be able to do that. And we need to have containers so that we are messaging passing. But if you can't see it, if all you can see is that expendable value, we're going to be reduced to superficial language that lends itself only to superficial performances. And that's what we have today.
I'd like to highlight one part of what you've referenced a few times, where if you can't see it, if you don't know what it looks like, you can't identify it. No one's languaged it around you. People aren't calling attention to it around you. People haven't taught you to look for that thing. You haven't had experience of looking for that thing. One of the places that this is especially relevant is where there are, unfortunately, increasing numbers of people who are experiencing hidden, unrecognized neurological injury, or a variety of things that are similar. There's certainly an unaddressed, undiagnosed concussions epidemic where people have no idea that they have concussion injuries, and that affects the whole body. And one of the things where any kind of trauma is essentially neurological injury. It changes the language centers of the brain. It changes the relational functions of the brain. And so with neurological injury, a lot of people have experience of some sort of levels of neurological injury. But what tends to be unknown pretty much everywhere we look is what happens when someone has such severe neurological injuries or similar that they can't find help anywhere. No one understands what they're saying. They're mischaracterized, they're misdiagnosed, they're taken advantage of in a variety of ways. Their families don't know what to do. The professionals in their communities don't know what to do. And when you have these situations compounding and compounding, and including where there's opportunistic predation, opportunistic violence going on because those people and their families are vulnerable. What happens is that the wiping out of neurological function, the wiping out of memory, it's like a forest fire. Takes out all the trees, all the brush above the ground, and you still have root structures down here. But if you don't have people around you who are nurturing and supporting new growth, it might be very difficult to grow back. When you don't have people helping you do that, especially if you keep having violence that's occurring and like laying trauma on the trauma on the trauma. And you go to professionals and you try to get help and no one recognizes it, or people mischaracterize you and they say you made that up, that sort of thing. I have had experiences of very extreme neurological injury where I now have a very vivid bodily thankfully memory, because of the intuitive network architecture helping me hold that memory of what it is to have your recognition and structures gone. So what happens is, like, if a little child does not have people around the little child saying things like, be good to your neighbor, here's how to use a fork, here's how to treat a dog, look both ways before you cross the street, here are all of the things that people know, that people learn. If a little child, instead of a caring family and community, has opportunistic predators around them, they will learn the language and structures of the opportunistic predators. And this is the same or very similar for adults with severe neurological injury, where there is trauma can wipe the slate clean, and then it can be replaced with whatever the person is exposed to. So when we do not have strong social fabric, strong relational structures of honorable behavior and caring for one another and respecting one another, what happens is that perpetrator interests can hang out around communities programming traumatized people who don't have anyone interacting with them in a positive, life affirming, building beauty in the world kind of way. So when you're talking about, can you recognize, and you've mentioned psychopathy, and we were talking somewhat before also about psychopathy. In the intuitive network, a lot of the work we do is specifically about what prevents human trafficking violence. And our experience with perpetrators in human trafficking intersections is that those people did not choose that life. They didn't choose to do harm to others. Overwhelmingly, they had horrifying experiences and they chose to survive. And that created the structures and the ways of being, how do you survive in this situation? What do you do if this kind of thing happens? And what we find is that if we don't create more life affirming architecture that welcomes people in and gives people a chance to be exposed to decent behavior, loving behavior, what is love? If we don't do that, then what's happening is that the harmful structures, the harmful influences, they're the only things that many vulnerable people are exposed to. And we end up with more predation as a result. So we have to, if we're going to take responsibility for any of it, those of us who have been most severely affected, we start to realize, wow, we're going to have to take responsibility for the ambient vibration here, or else we can't have the beautiful garden that we want. We'll just have to dissociate from all of those desperate people, which doesn't work, because then the desperation expands. But what you're describing in terms of can I recognize the thing? Have I ever taught to recognize? We have to create environments where we help one another recognize the life.
And to that point, this is where I departed from the traditional, what in strategy and structure, it came down to how do you negotiate, okay? But what I've discovered is that one, negotiation is baked into our nervous system. It is very much a tacit, embodied movement solution that appears much more like sports or music than it does appear in the traditional education sense. In fact, I kind of actually got away from even talking about learning, because it's not learning in the traditional sense. When people will default to, oh, just give me a book, or tell me what to do, or what's the tactic, which is what, despite wonderful professionals in the field of both negotiation and conflict resolution, it falls short every time, because as living systems, as self-organizing collective intelligence ourselves, okay, if I believe that, hey, I can mimic that person, our bodies are not going to agree. Our bodies keep the score, and everybody should read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, because that not only will reveal a lot about how our nervous system is picking up signals and message passing at a very, very deep level, it also speaks a lot about how we got here in terms of our medical system, our deficit-based medical system, that everything can be classified as a deficit, as a disease. And now, in all the research, really, what's been fascinating and continuing to do the research is that it's like you have to take these research papers and understand that the only way they could get funding to write this paper, to do this research, is if it had a direct line of sight with some drug.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of now with AI,
Yeah.
because it's like I have to tease apart these things that are about intelligence, because let's make the machine smarter. Why don't we focus on making people smarter? I have to go through and siphon through, because it's like there is these technical optimists that, bless their hearts, it's like, but what is showing up now to this point? And Ryan's kind of like, when are you going to talk about your framework? Is I, so,
Really?
uh,
Oh, I didn't realize.
uh,
What?
ah,
This is a fun new experiment. Tony,
yes, Tony,
up here.
speak to us, Tony.
Hi. Okay. You guys are very complex and very philosophical. Just want to tell you a little story. Let's see. Okay, so I mentioned Edgar Cahn and time banking has influenced my life, and he influenced a anthropologist in Wales by the name of Geoff, it's Geof Thomas. And Geoff founded the Wales Institute of Community Currency. And he went and developed, I guess, program is the way to put it, time bank as a means to achieve different goals. So there was a time bank built to teach young people. There was a time bank built to take care of intergenerational relationships. There was a time bank to do community building. There were several. So over a period of years, I don't know, maybe 10. And I got to meet him during this time. And then he passed away. He died. That was very sad. But nonetheless, COVID came along, and I couldn't have face-to-face meetings here in my region, in my community, in this place because of COVID. So I had communications from Geoff that I'd never read, that, copies of his efforts and writings. And I went to those and I found Raising the Value of Learning paper. It was about 12 or 14 pages. And he had a PDF that went along with it, two other documents that presented the paper was a text paper, all in words. But then he did graphics and did a visualization presentation of lifelong learning. And the idea was that to use time banking in the sense of recording, teaching, and learning from one another, to create a community where the deal is that you are participating in a learning culture And there would be people in the membership that you could, talk about your values, your organizational goals, your personal goals, and share them with others in the hope that you would learn to be a better teacher and practitioner by having people to listen to you. But this was an iterative rollover feedback loop within the membership. And I created a website based on his paper and based on his ideas. And I put it in the chat. And it's right there. You can go and take a look at it. It's
Awesome.
not me. It's not my words. This is Jeff Thomas's words. And the difficulty here is it's learning and doing. The difficulty is focusing on what you get out of bed for in the morning. What do you want to share with your community? What's important? What is the isolated cause that makes you, want to participate in the world in an uplifting way? What drives your engine? So, and then you could share that with other people, but getting people to see that can become an academic, and I hate to use that word, but a time tunnel back to prior to the domination of capital and greed over educational institutions, to a time a couple centuries back where wisdom and knowledge was shared in a community by those that were practitioners, or those that were elder, or those that were nurtured, so that the community, the village, learned from one another. That is what was going on for thousands of years with human beings. And what Jeff, as an anthropologist here, I think is articulating the framework, the boundaries, the essence of resorting back to the way we used to get along together in community. So I hope you read that. And that's
I'm looking for that link. Can you say another reference about the link so that I can
it's in the chat. Just click it in the chat.
Is it the behavior change quote?
No, not that one, the one below it.
The ourworld.org?
Yeah, that's a website. It's just a URL. So
I'm very interested in Jeff's work. I would really like to explore a lot more of that.
Yeah, well, you got to come to my meeting tonight.
Yeah, I was just reading something about back in the days of the Greek and Greece, and they pointed out something that was important, and that is that to come into space, actually people they were expected to prepare themselves. They were expected to do a fair amount of training before they were actually able or allowed into the more rigorous debating that went on, in that class, and that is why. And Ryan and I talked about this in terms of helping people learn the language that I'm going to be sharing with you shortly, in terms of and so that they could participate, because what I've kind of observed is, and in terms of if we're going to teach people to negotiate, which is a frightening experience for many, rightfully so, it's almost cruel to throw people into the ring, if you will, without a fair amount of some training so that they can acclimate themselves and be prepared for the pressures that they're going to feel. And in fact, I try to, although I'm conflicted in some degree, because I want people to be aware of when they should negotiate, when they are being negotiated with, because it's very nuanced. And most people, they've attached it to some event, and yet they don't really pick up the subtle messages that, quite frankly, the predatory behaviors make it very apparent once you understand how negotiation and manipulation occur. So so that I'll share with that, and it does speak to the fact that we need to have healing spaces, but we also need to be clear that there needs to be spaces we can come into that we are learning to build our anti-fragile abilities, because if we're expecting to be comfortable, then we're going to be disappointed out in the real world. So we need to be able to prepare both to protect each other, but also to guard against to guard and protect the value within the communities. That's we have this illusion, which is quickly becoming much more apparent today, that justice comes through our court system.
Yes.
And nothing could be further from the truth.
Susan, thank you. I just want to just prove to you that I did know Jeff. There's a picture of me and Jeff. And
handsome guys there.
Yeah, well, Jeff's dead. So this we're talking, and what you're talking about is
Oh, I don't think this is visible. I don't know if we can make it visible, or can we? Oh, it is. Okay. I keep trying to catch a glimpse of the other screen and see what this is. We've never done this before. We've never broadcast from Zoom this way. I see it now. I think it's going great.
okay. Susan talks about the objectification of students in the learning system, and how they've been brought up to be factory workers, and that they've been information has been deposited in their brains. And the new learning paradigm, we need to change the way we teach and learn institutionally and casually. That we can produce information, produce personal and social development, for the lack of a better way to produce change. So something new that you didn't know before. And by the way, Lev Vygotsky gets to
You lose him?
We lost Tony's microphone.
Ooh.
There we go.
But you can see the print, right? Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, how do I put this? The change occurs socially.
Yeah.
Human development, personal and social, collective development occurs in groups and in networks, in relationships. And we've talked about this from different angles and different perspectives today and the last time I was with you. We
Yep.
keep kicking this around. And the problem that comes up is commitment, the commitment pull to the goal or to the participatory group, the identifying yourself as part of a new culture, that you transition into a new way of thinking, and the people with you think that way, and you are part of that collective.
Mhm.
That we don't know how to pull people together to have a collective consciousness. So it's the concept of onboarding, the concept of commitment, the concept of sustainability of being together. Groups fracture over time. They don't have, as we tried to talk about the other day, the glue or the sustainability, and it only occurs in critical, crises, climate change, fires, family disasters, whatever. You get a new consciousness and coming together in a commitment pool or commons, but then it goes away. So we as culture and society need to learn how to do this. And
Absolutely.
the hook that Susan throws out, and it's a good one, it's not a bad one, but that's that we don't learn how to change. Our grandkids and their grandkids are going to have a hell of a bad time. We're not coping with the crises, the social breakdown, the climate problems, the violence problems, the emotional, personal problems in society, quick enough, fast enough, articulately, a way to address these needs. And so there's just so much to do that, how do I say that? But each one of us, if we begin to think more goal-oriented and collective-oriented, I think our kids will have a better time. I'm done talking. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mhm. I got Mhm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. 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 Yes. So
There's something there's something really important that's happening in the dialogue that's emerging from the specific individuals in this room. And it's not the same from any one of you, but there is some kind of very intriguing synthesis that is developing as I want to continue this. I'm looking forward in whatever way we can continue this, because we're discovering some things I think are going to prove to be very powerful stuff.
So in fact, can I share my screen and I will leave a second cliffhanger? Okay.
That's my
His-
that is my
He's
outro.
speaking to me, yes.
Who? I sent it. I have received and am receiving and hope to continue to receive the same gifts from the wonderful, beautiful 3 people in this room. That is what I was trying to convey.
4 people. Yes. Yeah, the gift is the love between us, even though but I mean, I can feel it, and and feeling you, feeling me, feeling you, feeling me is so regulating. Excellent. That actually comes out of Thomas Hubble's work, and he does, by the way, offer a free every 2 weeks, 7 p.m. Thursday. There's a group that that's what we do. We just feel each other feeling us, and it's remarkable. So, yes, so Thomas Hubble, intergenerational, probably one of the leading thought leaders in collective trauma. But so I want to share my screen for just a second, just to say to the audience that this is what you're glimpsing and why you want to come back. Okay. Because this is what we've been kind of talking around. I want to share. Okay, can you see that? Okay. So in a future date, we will go more into this, but yeah, this actually speaks, I think, to what we're talking about in terms of let's put this on the table instead of pointing and judging and and saying you have this or you have that, and look at how is value flowing through us, and actually be able to put a name around what are the resources that we have available, not in just our bank accounts, but our resourcefulness in the resources that if we would increase our capabilities to language around needs, to language around how we want to contribute, to language around what commitments we're willing to make at this point in time, because you are absolutely right. If I can't account for what my constraints are, if I can't account for what my capacity is, if I can't account for capabilities, I don't know what to focus conversation on. I don't have a language unless I have the ability to understand what is being afforded to me in that moment. These are, the clarity, focus, accountability, and commitment. How do we shape it? How do we sculpt it? How do we create a structure? And how do we create coherence, which is logic, and logic felt in our body, of how value is flowing through community? So that's my cliffhanger.
Oh, I thank you all for helping me learn new things and grow. And so I'm just going to be greedy and take all this information and love and run with it. Thank you.
You got it all today. I will say that much. That's it. Just keep rehearsing this. Mm. And that's okay. And that's okay.